Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot. Thank you very, very much for being here. So I'm going to do something a little interesting today, I think. I want to take a look at the energies around the United States as a whole um, between like November 7th and January 20th. So post-election day, leading right up to the inauguration. So that period of time. I want to take a look and see if I can get a handle on what the energy of the states might be like at that time. Now, I'm going to caution you that the energies now are predictive of the energies then. But if something significant changes or happens, then the energies likewise shift. So what I'm trying to say is, um, let's say that Trump is so diminished by time people are voting, right? And when the vote doesn't turn out the way he expects, if his literally his life force, his energy, his will, it becomes crushed by that or really diminished by that, that sort of a fight, fight, fight attitude of his is not going to then be reflected in that period of time because he will have sort of like be a balloon that's been deflated, right? He's just not going to have it to give. So now, okay, so the Steve Bannings are going to be around and the whatever his name Miller is, Stephen Miller. But let's just, and of course, let's not forget the Federalist Society, but let's just take a peek and see if we can kind of figure out what might be going on around that period of time. Before I move on, just thank you to my new subscribers. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Soulprint. Um, and for anybody looking for a private reading, again, if you're going to the information box below, you're going to see an email address, soulprint888@gmail.com. Just send me an email requesting reading information, and I will send you back everything you need to know. All righty. Get started, shall we? Don't be surprised if this goes from a tarot card reading to channeling, um, or more definitive channeling, just because of what I'm trying to find out here. All right, here we go. USA, November 7th, January 20th. USA, November 7th, January 20th. USA, November 7th, January 20th. We shall see, shall we? Create some room here. Okay, interesting cards. All right, we're starting with the Eight of Swords. So right off the bat, this is sort of indicating that we're not going to have a definitive answer probably until the 8th of November, or hopefully not the 9th. Hopefully it doesn't go that long. But it feels like on November 7th, it feels like there isn't like crystal clarity, which if I'm not mistaken, also happened with the Biden election, right? Where, it was kind of, it looked good, but it took a while for there to sort of be like definite, okay. So that's sort of what it feels like. There's going to be a huge amount of voter turnout or ballots cast. That's be part of what's going on is the sheer volume of what people are um, trying to process, in the vote centers or the process centers. Just before I forget, um, don't forget to check your registration. I'm going to tell you that like once a week from now until the election. Um, And also for those of you who are able to vote by mail, be mindful of how long it may take that mail to get to where it needs to go. Um, the joy is still part or still head of the postal service, and he makes no bones about the fact that he really is sort of on the side, and so you want to be really careful that it's gonna get where you want it to get in time to get there. I've heard some really horror stories about particularly, Georgia, kind of in the South, of voting, votes just taking forever and ever to get their mail, just basic mail, taking months to get from point A to point B. So just be mindful of that. But anyways, there's going to be a significantly higher degree of votes casted. It's going to actually, in some ways, kind of be the talk. It's like, oh my gosh, like, where did all these people come from? Which also tells me that any attempts to continue to diminish the voter rolls are going to, between now and then, it's like 30 days, not even maybe. In fact, it's not, like, maybe, like, I don't know, 27, 28. Um, between now and then are also not going to, um, be particularly successful, say it that way. So you have the world. So this is telling me that at some point, there's going to be a decision made. Now, you can look at this and say, okay, well, this is the end of the Biden administration. So, of course, there's going to be a new beginning. But it doesn't quite feel like that. It feels more like the closing of a circle. So something that has become completed. And that's connected to Trump. All right. That is connected to it. It feels like within, I don't know, I want to say like the first 10 days, okay, of post election, that there's going to be sort of a definitive um, answer. There's going to be some fighting, all right? He's going to push. He's going to keep on pushing. So obviously, he's not going to be diminished to the point where, he doesn't have an ounce of energy left in him. But his fighting is going to be irrational, erratic, sort of like a blind rush into who knows what. Like it's just he's not going to make any sense. So what the world card is actually telling us is that that is going to signify an actual completion of the circle we call Trump. All right. So his time in the public eye as a political person is going to be over. Okay, so the writing's going to be on the wall. What do we have here? We have the Queen of Swords followed by the Empress. So, Kamala Harris. But the Empress is more important because the Empress is talking about not only sort of a new beginning, the birth of a new era. I mean, you've got the whole what is it, Pluto going into Aquarius thing that I think it's finally going to be final sometimes in the month of November. Um, but this is about the power of the female vote. And the power of the vote of the men who support women. All right. I got to kind of remember to say that because I think that there's a whole lot more men out there who really, really get it. I also think that, somewhere along the way, there should have been a marketing strategy about directed at men, directed particularly at younger guys, um, pointing out what their life might be like if there was no birth control and no morning after pill. Think about that, shall we? So, but this is about the absolute force and the power of The female vote. Okay. Now, we have judgment sitting here. So this is telling me that ultimately there is going to be a definitive judgment made. All right. So even if things get dragged into court, and I suspect there are going to be some, not 60. Okay. Like I know that there's a lot of talk about, oh, the Republicans are ready to go. And I'm not suggesting they aren't, but there comes a point where the win is going to be decisive and definitive enough that um, there are going to be some legal people, what lawyers or whatever, who are like going to be a bit more reluctant to file these like frivolous lawsuits because it's just um, they're just going to look foolish. And frankly, by and large, the courts, certainly 60 courts last time, were like done with it, right? So that's also important. So there's going to be a bit of a fight ahead, but ultimately it feels like one, the judgments aren't going to go their way, and more importantly, it's like the votes or the number of votes or the electoral college, whatever it is sort of really definitive, and so there's not a lot of arguing to be done. Now this is going to bring a change of fortune to the United States. Now what I like about this is it's followed by the high priestess. So this is telling us that part of the good fortune has to do finally with secret being exposed, with corruption being identified and sort of halted. It has to do with kind of the light, not not people on the right, but the right way, the light. It's going to win because it is going to, the volume is, the numbers are going to be great enough that they're literally going to sort of overwhelm the more lower vibrational energy. So these two cards are telling me, the High Priestess and the Wheel of Fortune, are telling me that there is, again, good fortune. Like I say, it really feels like in some ways that time, that cycle of him is closing. They're telling me, so this is sort of interesting going forward. They're telling me that there is going to be an attempt made, not right away, but what is it, like 18 months before the midterms, right? So 6 months post, which is for whatever reason the time that Americans seem to think that they should start the next election cycle. There's going to be an attempt to sort of continue the mega movement, and it's not going to work. It's not going to take hold because there isn't somebody who can duplicate what Trump was able to do. And so even though they're going to try, it just doesn't feel like it's going to be particularly successful. So again, that is something where you really just don't need to get yourself all twisted up and worried and anxious about. You have the Chariot and the Page of Wands, okay? So as things move forward, there's going to be a feeling or a sense that Two of Pentacles, that in spite of the attempts to unbalance or to manipulate the votes, ultimately moving forward with, normally the Chariot's sort of about almost like chaotic energy, but what I'm getting with this card now, it's like the difference between black and white, right? Negative and positive. And ultimately you end up with the Page of Wands, who is bringing good and happy news. So you, this this pertains, it feels like, to the period of time, I want to sort of say kind of middle of November to like Christmas time, where that's where you're going to see sort of attempts to take things to court, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just not going to hold, right? It is just not going to hold. Ultimately, what you have is the celebration of women, right? You have that powerful, powerful energy, saying no, 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 no. We're not going back to the 1800s. We're not even going back to the 1950s. This is about moving forward. And the power of women and the men who support them is not to be questioned. It's not to be doubted. You know, again, I don't know how many times I've said this over the course of the Trump event, but there's a reason why that expression about, like, hell hath no fury like a woman, it just feels like it's like stomping a foot down and saying enough, just enough is enough, stop it. And that in a lot of ways is going to unbalance a lot of the old school Republicans, whether it is the ones who have, are 75 and 85 years old, and they've been, in politics since, I don't know, they were like 30 or 40. So they have these huge, long careers. But what has happened is, in many ways, they have taken the ideas and the attitudes and they keep trying to drag them forward. And it's just not going to work. It's just not. And so what's going to become very, very clear is that there needs to be a new way of looking at things. There needs to be a new way going forward. Now, Two of Swords. What we're looking at here is an is basically it's choices. It's about choices that need to be made. Are people finally going to take off their blinders, right? Are they finally going to see clearly what the corruption and the destruction was about? Okay, so between that period of time, you're going to see sort of groups of people, including a percentage of megas, who just are kind of coming to terms with the fact that they're done with the chaos. They can't take anymore. They're exhausted financially. They're tapped out because they keep giving money to Trump. So you know, even that you're just gonna sort of feel this like a draining of energy around him and around those ideas and attitudes. And it's going to become very, very clear that despite the fact that he tried to steal the election, the fact that he chose to look away from the law and kind of do his own thing without, um, it's like without the fear of consequences, which is so interesting because by, I think it's like the middle of November, the 7th or 8th, um, there are legal things that are going on in Chutkan's court. Like apparently that is the defense has to file something by then. And so these legal wranglings and maneuverings are going to continue. And I'm not I'm not going to say that because he doesn't win, the law comes down harder on him. But what I'm going to say is because he doesn't win, there is a very slight pivot to him being treated like a regular defendant. And I think some of that is going to literally come from Judge Chutkan's court, right? Because she's already made it really clear that she doesn't care about no election; she cares about law. Um, but you're just going to see sort of this slight shifting. And so there's going to be a balancing, all right? Those who have felt um, sidelined, not heard, forgotten, there's slowly, slowly going to be a balancing of that kind of energy. And I believe that that's going to carry long after sort of January 20th. It's just going to be a new beginning, kind of healing energy. Now, there's still work to be done. And so it's really important that everybody does everything they can. You're being told, listen, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can come out of this, but you need to do what you need to do to make sure that the law and the democracy is upheld and put in place. This is not the time to sort of step back and rest on your laurels or think, listen, everybody says there's going to be lots and lots of people voting. I don't need to bother. That's not going to work. It's really, really, really important. Um, in part because there are going to be some areas where, as the votes come in, it, it, it there's going to be such strength in those numbers that any notion of trying to pass this off as cheating, right, it's just going to be blown out of the water. All right, so thank you very much. That was really interesting. Spirit, I got two areas that I want us to already look at. Tell me about January 6th. What can we expect on January 6th when the electoral votes need to be tabulated, whatever that's called, or however that works? Again, Canadian, doing my best here with US politics. Okay. It almost looks like a non-event. First of all, because you've got Kamala Harris, who is, president of the House or the legislature, whatever that is. So she's the one in that ceremonial role. Two, they have passed legislation that basically says this person doing this, yeah, this is ceremonial. There is nothing, they don't have the power to basically do anything except read the numbers. So they sort of tried to close that loophole. Um, there's going to be an attempt to sort of duplicate the last January 6th, but it doesn't feel like it takes hold. It doesn't feel like, this is, how every time Trump was going into court and he would say, there's going to be riots in the streets and people are going to be protesting 10 deep and no one's going to tolerate or put up with this. And then there was like 5 people standing outside the courthouse, sort of holding onto limp signs. It's kind of going to be that same energy where there's going to be a lot of buildup. But when it comes right down to it, too many people have had to pay a price for their involvement in the last January 6th. And make no mistake, the list is not anywhere near complete, okay? Because once Trump goes down, there's going to be a whole list of other politicians who are going to be finding that their name was on a list too. And indictments are coming for them. And then the average layperson, right? Um, you know, that Tina Peters, the one who let Trump supporters or MAGA people in to look at or take the voting machines. I think she was in Colorado. She just got like a 9-year sentence for that. Um, but apparently, she was still mouthing the garbage. And so there's going to be some, right, who are just not going to let it go. But by and large, people are like, I can't afford to do this again. And so there's not going to be that great big huge crowd. All right. Good to know. Tell me about the inauguration, please. It's the most amazing, amazing energy. Kind of similar to Obama's. That sort of hope and that sense of renewal and a new beginning. There are not going to be any disruptions. Frankly, there's going to be security, et cetera, in place. But there's not going to be anything of any consequence that happens because, again, that powerful, hopeful, happy, joyful energy is going to permeate what goes on. Um, Biden is Biden is going to be so touched, so sort of over emotional, as he watches this sort of protege of his, if you will, pick up that mantle. Um, Her inauguration speech is going to be very, very uplifting. And one of the things that is going to be sort of really noticeable about it is that it's going to be incredibly inclusive. So even after all of it, there's going to be her continued attempts to keep that tent really big and welcome people in and welcome people in, because that's actually going to be a really important part of how change happens. Because there's always going to be little pockets of the country, and maybe some not so little, that are going to be super, super resistant. I mean, she's a woman, she's black, and this is just not going to do. But by and large, again, that energy is diminishing. And so she is going to continue to, keeping the red carpet rolled out and letting people know that they don't need to feel politically lost. They can come under the big tent and feel like somebody is listening to them and somebody is working for them. Okay, so what do we take away from this? Well, we take away the fact that the election is probably not going to be decided until late on the 7th or early on the 8th. The numbers, however, are going to be significant enough that um, there's not going to be a whole lot of question about who won and by how much they won. Voter turnout, unbelievable. There's going to be some back and forth and they're going to try to do this whole replay of the election was stolen, but there's so many people who just don't want to hear it anymore. And even by that point, you're going to see a lot of the mainstream media sort of pivot a little bit because their viewers are going to be, I don't want to hear this anymore. I'm done. Like, he's gone. Could we just keep him gone, please? January 6th looks like it's going to move ahead smoothly the way it should. And the inauguration the energy is just really lovely and wonderful. So there we have it. I hope you found that helpful and interesting. Please don't forget to leave your comments below. And thank you for all of the thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed by now, maybe you could. Until next time, take care and be well. Bye-bye for now.